Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, whether you're in the world, it is your Lore and Saviour. And today we're going to be reviewing ShadowDark, which is one of the more interesting success stories within the TTRPG sphere for a whole host of different reasons. This is designed and developed by one person, a woman by the name of Kelsey Dion, who, if I've butchered your name somewhere along the line, I am really sorry about that. And through her company and brand, the Arcane Library, that's the logo on the back of this gorgeous hardcover book, I was able to raise in 2023 via very successful crowdfunding on Kickstarter something to the tune of $1.3 or $1.6 million, which is a lot of wonga for something that is so small. Which isn't to say that it's a bad thing, I just think it's very fucking impressive that an independent creator has raised so much money, and it's the fact that it's a woman, and we need more women representation in the TTRPG sphere. And I know I've just triggered a bunch of neckbeards by saying that. Well, sorry, I guess, go and sit on a fat one and swivel. Now, of course, there are other bits and pieces that are associated with this crowdfunding thing, to which you can go and check out the Kickstarter if you're so interested in that. But that's not what this is about. This is going to be a full review of the book and a few other bits and pieces that the Arcane Library sent me, because this and the other bits I'm delaying showing you are all review copies. So I'm very grateful that the Arcane Library have been so kind and generous of saying all that shit to me. I will also point out that just the fact it's a review copy, I'm not so inclined to give it a glowing review regards to whether money was exchanged or not. Now, money was exchanged in this, in the fact that I had to pay for the shipping. I sent them an email to see if they'd be willing to send over a review copy, physical stuff, just because I find that shit a lot easier to digest mentally. PDFs are great for flicking through the rules or trying to prove a particular point online right to a particular dickhead, or wrong, but I much prefer looking at the physical product because it really does seem a lot more to the tune about what everything represents. Anyway, they got back to me saying, yes, we'll happily send you over the physical stuff providing you pay for the shipping, which I very gladly did, because one, it wasn't a great amount in the grand scheme of things. It was about 25 quid, which compared to the about 80 quid I would have paid for overall, it's a small sacrifice, I should say. But that aside, I am very happy to support independent creators, providing they put out really good shit, and they are not shitty people themselves. So what are the other bits and pieces they sent over to me? Well, they sent over this small Games Master Screen. I will give a trigger warning now, because on the other side of this panel there's a spider, and we're going to be having a look at the panel proper in just a moment. And it's a rather creepy looking spider as well, so do keep that in mind when we talk about the Games Master Screen. They sent over the solo rules, because we do talk a lot about solo TTRPG stuff on the channel. I've done a fair amount of solo play stuff as well, which you can definitely go and check out. And they also sent over as a bonus, which I didn't ask for, Curse Scroll ShadowDark Zine Volume 1 Diablerie. Which, unlike everything else here, I had a little bit of experience with because I had the PDFs already, and they also sent over the PDFs to everything else as well, which was really nice. I didn't look at this until I received it, because I wanted to do like a live reaction sort of thing when I unboxed it on the channel, which is going to appear up there for you to go and gander at. And having a little flick through it, I really liked it. It's right up my street, very horror fantasy focused. It was a very nice little touch that it didn't have to do, and it would have cost them extra to do that, so I'm really grateful that they did that for such a nice high quality product. To that end, I'm not going to be reviewing this on the channel because I haven't actually used this, and I think it's only fair to review TTRPG things you've actually used, or in the case of a review copy for a Kickstarter thing that's coming out, making it very fucking clear the intentions behind that, etc. and so forth. So I haven't used this yet, so I can't really review it, but I have used everything else that I've gone through: the Games Master Screen, the solo rules, and of course the main core book to play some ShadowDark and run it as well, because there's a difference between playing and running things, and playing things solo and playing things in a traditional sense with a group, no matter how small or large that may well be. And one thing that I think is going to make my review of ShadowDark and the accessories different from everyone else's is that I don't have a strong fantasy TTRPG background. My main introduction into TTRPGs has been through Vampire the Masquerade and the World of Darkness, which is a very different system and setting to a lot of the fantasy style stuff out there. So I feel that I'm going to be coming in from a lens that you're not going to find with a lot of other ShadowDark reviews, so if that is going to be an interesting little gimmick for you, stick around and find out and see what your Lore and Saviour has to say about all of that. And I think without further ado, I think we're going to start on the Games Master Screen, so that spider's going to be popping up a bit more now. I absolutely love the design of this Game Master Screen. If you just have a little look at the front cover, It doesn't really show that well, and I'm sorry that I'm cutting off the top a little bit, but this is a very stark, bright, and I dare say vibrant black and white design, which is a bit weird to say for something that is so, well, black and white. Now, how can you have something that's vibrant, that's black and white? The whites really pop out, the blacks are really strong, and all the shading and the gradients of things really does make the whole thing come alive. And my favourite illustrations on the Games Master screen is that creepy ass spider. But it's also, I can't see that little thing there. The black coming through a bit more here, but it's like more turquoisey because of the light there and the light up there. Like, it just fills me with wonder. Like, okay, so this is a dark fantasy styled game. Like, even the wizard here looks fucking deranged. Like, what the fuck's going on? Like, I get rather inspired as a game master to set these sort of things up. Like, why are they fighting this creature? What's behind all the caverns and whatnot? What's the fucking huge ass wizard doing? What the fuck is that creature thing? What is all of this? Like, it looks so cool, and just that can inspire a lot of details to the budding games master as well, and players as well. Maybe you could pretend that you're one of those things down there that didn't survive the encounter with the spider. You lost your crew down there. Now you're on a mission to go and slay the spider again. Like, there's so much inspiration just on the Games Master screen as well. And you've probably noticed by now that the Games Master screen is kind of small, so it's very easy to take away in like a back pocket if you've got particularly large pockets or coat, or just slip it in a side pocket of a bag. Very easy to set up. You just set up on a little desk like that, like so. And as you can see, it sort of leaves things fairly open to the rest of the players, so they can easily see you, and it doesn't cut you off too much from the players, which I think is a weird compliment to praise, purely because, one, I don't think Games Master screens cut off too much between the Games Master and the players, because you're always going to be able to see their head unless you've got something like me that slouches really badly. But even so, I do try to make sure, and I'm sitting up a bit straighter to prove this point, that my players are able to see me and they can see any hand gestures or facial expressions or whatever it is I'm going to be doing. And also, if you're worried about cutting off the players, Games Master divide, I guess, don't use the Games Master screen, I think. And also, this is also coming from the angle that a lot of the Games Master screens I have seem to be in landscape, so they're kind of this height already, they just stretch a bit wider. So I don't think it's as much of an issue that people tend to make it out to be. But the small, compact, easy, convenient mentality is a constant theme that runs across the whole ShadowDark mentality. But regarding the back cover, i.e. the bits of information that the Games Master is really going to be able to see, whilst useful, I'm rather disappointed by how little there is actually here. I think some of the more useful mechanics and systems could have been included. Like, even if they had to add like an additional screen and like have a bit of artwork on the front panel, I think they could have had more on here. But that being said, what's on here is useful all the same. I would have just liked more. But what's actually on the Games Master screen, I'm going to treat it as like the left and the right panels because they're kind of connected. So on the far left and the center left, you've got NPCs related stuff. So like age, ancestry, alignment, wealth, characteristics named by syllable. So you could roll a d20 and determine some names. So if I did 2, 4, 6, 8, that would be Zamborius. Now that could be the name of a place, it could be a weapon, it could be a creature. It really depends on the scenario where you're having to roll these names whilst the players are discussing things if you need some inspiration. And I will say that the core book does have like names dependent on the different ancestries as well, which are human, elf, dwarf, halfling, half orc, and goblin. Why half orc and not full on orc, I'm not entirely too sure, but representation and diversity is a good thing, I suppose, here. And on the right panels, so center right and far right, you've got basically enemy and treasure related shit. So you've got some random encounters and chance related stuff, their activities and their moods. Then you've got treasures and the overall qualities and features, EXP for handing out treasure quality, and luxury items. And as I said already, I would have just liked it if there was just a bit more mechanic stuff here, like some other suggestions about difficulty challenges, etc. and so forth. I just think this is very lackluster overall, and I find myself using this very sparingly, only to basically look at a type of person and the treasure quality. And even then, I'm constantly forgetting that the XP for treasure quality is on the Games Master screen, for whatever reason. I don't know if it's a them thing or a me thing, but either way, it's a thing, and I just think as a Games Master screen, it could have done a lot more with it. So it's basically lent into that small compact vibe over its actual practicality. Which unfortunately takes me over to the SoloDark solo rules to ShadowDark, because I kind of feel that what's in here is a little lackluster as well, which is a big shame because I had hoped and expected a lot more, especially with how SoloDark has been eaten whole by the solo TTRPG sphere. Well, I mean, what's in here is nice. I just kind of hoped for a lot more, and there was like a really weird decision choice of its main oracle that I think is worth addressing. But anyway, let's go through this and see what we find. Well, it starts off rather nicely on the front page, telling you basically what you're going to find inside. It's oracle, the prompt. It's got some modified rules in here, how to deal with characters. Now, it recommends you doing a group of NPCs, and which then fits with its luck system being. For each player around the table, you get 1 point of luck to use to re-roll and things. And it also recommends that if you want to have only one PC in your group, consider it at a higher level. It would be nice if it told you the recommending starting level or something like that. Do I do level 2, level 3, level 4? When I did this for myself, I made one character, Goblin, that was like start at level 1. They didn't last very long, admittedly, just because... just the nature of dice rolls rather than the enemies that I was choosing. And then when I made the second... But then I made a character after that, was like a level 4 elf, and that was a bit difficult for me, just because he was a wizard, and I was like a lot of magic to juggle around with, but at least the spell names themselves gave me a general idea about what they did, and it wasn't so over the top and fantasy-like, and it was fairly easy to find in the core book. Emphasis on fairly, because as I've already mentioned, I did struggle to navigate around the book on occasion, even though it does have like the very little handy little bookmark things down the side. There, it's probably, as I said already, it's probably just a me thing, just trying to get used to navigating through the book, and I could probably put some more bookmarks in there, I guess. But anyway, let's just move on forward in the Solo Rule Zine. And one thing I really like about this is that these 2 pages, it has further suggestions online to enhance your solo role-playing. So there's a load of YouTube suggestions, including their own YouTube channel, because it would be remiss of them not to advertise their own self. It's also good to mention this because this actually showcases the Solo Rule Zine, so if you need a bit of a visual and audio cue of like how to do things, that's there for you. You've got some blogs which I have never heard of, apart from Chocolips, who do a lot of solo Merkborg stuff. You've got some podcasts, some social media stuff, which is only limited to a Reddit solo page, which is a bit frustrating because, you know, there are some solo themes out there on the TTR, which there could have been a bit more than just a Reddit forum, honestly. I think it's a bit lackluster there. And then there's, on the other page, you have a I need a page, like a monster, NPC, treasure, encounter, dungeon, and wilderness, and then it links you to a load of books to where you can find those certain things. And this is helpful for me, when I remembered it, that each of these different sections has where you can find the certain themes in the ShadowDark book. So if I need a dungeon, turn to page 130 to 131, and I'd also forget the contents of the theme as well from time to time, and just scrolling through the different pages and whatnot. So it's nice that those bits are reprinted here, but it also recommends other different books and sources online that you can use as well. Then you turn over and you get a very nice page of some black and white art of combat going on. As nice as this is, and the fact that it exists because I've used it for thumbnails already, I don't get why this is here, because it would have been nice if there were some additional rules and things that expanded upon this. It's not necessary. It doesn't add anything overall. I just feel they just had a quota to fill with pages, and that's just what they went with. Which isn't, again, to say that the artwork isn't nice. I do like it. I just wish they could have done more with it. Then you've got this very useful Dungeons Names Generator, which you roll on a D100, and depending on what you roll comes up with a different name prompt. So if I did 69, 59, 49, because they're 3 different columns, name 1, name 2, name 3... 69 gets us the Temple of the Golden Brothers. The Temple of the Golden Brothers. Okay, why are they gold? Is it a pious thing? Is it a greed-related thing? Or is it something a bit more sinister that you could twist with the word golden? Like, there are different ways you could like twist that depending on the situation you have in hand. Either it's doing something solo, or you do something in a more traditional sense. Because say that the players want to take up a dungeon you hadn't prepared, like you prove something on a whole tavern board or whatever, expect them to go after one thing, but now they're going to go after a dungeon. They ask someone about the dungeon, and you really need to quickly generate a dungeon on the fly, or at least to begin with the name, and you conjure up the Temple of the Golden Brothers. they start asking the similar sort of questions. They come up with ideas. You can quickly fucking write down notes so you don't forget things because they're cooking up the material for you. So there are different ways of using these different systems. So it's not just a solo tool. You can use this for other traditional play as well. And I wish that this had gone into that a bit more as well, saying that you should be using this in traditional games as well, which perhaps you might want to change the name of that. But alas, if it was called something else, it doesn't do great for algorithm trying to search up the solo rules, or it could have just been like the solo rules or Games Master emulator zine, but even then that has like the association with the Mythic GM emulator, 2nd edition by Tara Pigeon, which I know that Kelsey speaks of rather fondly on her YouTube channel, so why this wasn't fleshed out from that alone is beyond me. Actually, is that even mentioned in here as an inspiration? No. Which then makes me think, okay, for social media, the Mythic GM Discord, that could have gone here as well. There's so many different things that could have gone on there. And it also kind of goes back a little bit to like the social media call-out example, I guess. As nice as it is that Kelsey's like acknowledging the community at large and like other resources that people could use to inspire their games, it would have been nice if those 2 pages, so those 4 pages really, the 2 with the examples and the arts page, could have had more of those generational tools in there. Like, I mean, it's nice that it exists, but I wish they could have done more with it. But yeah, going past the dungeon names and the whole things I've just spent a lot of time waffling about, so the penultimate page is the actual Oracle rules, which are very bog standard, albeit a little misleading. Because on the first page it tells you what the Oracle is and like how to interpret the different results and things. Then you get what the actual Oracle means, and there's a little bit on that page as well. However, I don't like it because the Oracle is a little bit misleading, because the little box at the top of the page 10, which is also being wasted of the space here because the art is good, it doesn't really need to be used here. That could be used some other tools here, I reckon. But the Oracle itself is a D20 theme, as is a lot of the themes in this book. If you just have a look at that table and not read anything else, a no is from 1 to 9, a twist is on a 10, so basically something happens and then you can use on a general prompt theme, which is on the next page, to work out what's happening. And then a yes is from 11 to 20. But what it actually wants you to do is that an odd number is a yes, but. So 11 in this instance would be a yes, but. 13 would be a yes, but. Whereas an odd number on the other scale of things would be a no but. So 1 would be a no but. 3 would be a no but. I don't like this because it now puts the majority of your responses as yes but. Which, whilst can be exciting, more often than not in solo play you don't want that but. You don't want that complication because it slows things down a bit more. It adds complications, which can be spicy, as I said, but you just want the confirmation sometimes, I feel. So what I would recommend doing is actually making a twist of a 10 and 11. So that sort of breaks things up a bit easier with the division between the odds and the evens with the yes and no's and no and yes buts. You don't have to do that, of course, but that's just something that I've done because I just noticed the math was just, in my personal preference, a little off. That being said, I'm not too sure how I feel about dealing with likely and unlikely results here, because if you feel that something is likely, you roll 2d20 and you take the highest number, which is rolling with an advantage using some of the rules in here, and if you feel something that is unlikely, you roll a disadvantage, so you choose the lower numbers. And I'm not entirely too sure how I would have done this differently. And the way that I would deal with this is rolling the 1d20 and then adding or taking away a modifier, which is pinching / borrowing a rule from a variation of the Mythic GM emulator, Chaos Factor stuff by Tanner Pigeon, where a variation of this is not doing like the whole Chaos Factor like Call of Cthulhu crosshair sort of method. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. Whereas that you roll 2d10, and then depending whether something is likely or not, and then the level of the chaos factor, you add or take away certain modifiers to the roll, and then you convert to another table to see what is yes, what is no, etc. and so forth. That's what I would have liked to have seen, and to be honest, that's what I just tend to use anyway, just because I think it works a lot better. But when I was trying this, and like being as vanilla as I can, I don't know why rolling at advantage or disadvantage sort of like slipped me up a bit. Maybe it's because that I'm spending a bit more time looking at 2 dice rather than 1 and then doing the maths, which probably took about the same amount of time anyway. So this is a very nitpicky thing, and very much a personal taste thing. But you know, if you don't have to use the solo rules, you can use whatever system that you want. But yeah, as I said, I just kind of hoped something was a little bit different. But then the really useful thing, the prompts, which is like right at the back, which I suppose is easy to find because you open up the thing and go to the last page. And the way that this works is that this is a D100 table where you've got verbs and nouns, which depending on the scenario in hand, you get the whole different prompts, etc. and so forth. So let's just come up with something complete on the fly. I'm going to use my dog Emma as an example. The players are going through the dungeon and they see a creature has stirred from its slumber and they can't quite work out what it's doing, and I want to use these prompts to try and generate the sort of cavern beyond the dog as it now slimpers in towards its lair, and I'm using the whole movement thing as an example there. So if I did 24 and 25, first numbers that come to mind, 24 is block and the next one is weakness. So maybe there was like in video game style, like a big old sword or like a glowing red button or something that would make the players feel that they could kill the monster pretty quickly or like do double damage or something, which then begs the question, did the creature see the players and it's actually retreating, or maybe that it's wounded? I could then use the oracle to determine that whilst the players are talking against each other, to see whether it's wounded or whether it's like a weak spot, or maybe it's like a sensitive part that shoots fucking laser beams or fire or something like that. So that's how you can use the oracle system within standard play and solo stuff, because all of that really applies here. I just really would have hoped there was a lot more in there, probably because I use Mythic GM stuff for all my solo stuff, and that is just chock a block with so many different tables and generalized descriptions and things that I kind of hope with a bit more. And with so many different influences and tools that are mentioned in here, it would have been nice if they were just like, even just wholesale lifted, because they are all fantasy focused, and ShadowDark, as I'm going to talk about in a moment, is a fantasy TTRPG. So a lot of them can be adapted to tweak the whole vision of ShadowDark. And if it was a copyright thing, I don't know how you could copyright singular instances or words, and if that's a real issue for you, you could swap them about, use synonyms, etc. and so forth. Like, it's very difficult to plagiarize that sort of thing. So again, I'm just a bit baffled why there weren't more themes on here, unfortunately. Which I suppose takes us to ShadowDark proper, which is probably why you clicked on this video, or whatever fucking algorithm bollocks led you to me. Unlike the sources we've looked at so far, ShadowDark feels very much complete, and it is filled with so much goodness in there to run for your players or to use as a solo player. I feel that part of the reason why these SoloDark rules are so small is because the core book has so much stuff in there already. Like, there's stuff for generating monsters, like, to make him balanced, rather than just, like, the general descriptors where they've got wings, tails, they spit snot at you. Like, this actually tells you how to construct monsters, making them balanced with their stats and their levels and everything else, which I really like. Like, it's when I'm doing solo stuff, I'm always trying to find a way to generate NPCs and the like very fucking quickly, and that can be tweaked so fucking quickly to be whatever you want it to be, and I just love the fact that it allows you to customize monsters. I really like that as a games master. It has things for generating treasure and blessings and boons and weapons and armors descriptors. There's a whole variety of name generators as well that I think I've mentioned. And I'm sitting here trying to remember, the best thing that's in here in terms of generation is generating dungeons themselves, with having to go to explore your player, like room sizes, what you're going to find inside, which you can use with other scenarios in there, which you can use with other tools out there to actually generate what the different room sizes and things. And as I'm saying all of that, it would have been really cool if that in the pages that are filled up with artwork, there could have been just like a little table in here where you can roll to determine what the rooms look like. I would have really liked that, because I was using a solo dungeon generator thing, which I actually think was by Chocopolyps, funny enough, where you roll on a bunch of d6s to determine whether things are cogged or a room, and then these other little stats around the page. If I can find it online again, I'm going to leave it in the description below. But yeah, it's a really useful source, and I'm kind of surprised that that's not mentioned here, and the fact that Chocopolyps is mentioned in the solo rules as well. Anyway, I really like the fact that the dungeon generator thing is there as well, so you can be more general about it if you don't want to draw a map, either for yourself or your players. and just want to leave things as vague and mysterious and as creepy as possible, then that's absolutely fine. But yeah, what's in here is so useful for any games master that it's really no surprise to me while the solo TTRPG lot have swallowed it up. And it's just really easy to run and play traditionally and as a solo player. But what the fuck is ShadowDark, and how do you go about playing it? Well, as you've probably seen by the artwork already, ShadowDark is a fantasy TTRPG that is D20 based, i.e. that most of its interactions are determined by a 20-sided dice. That holy relic that has become the shining beacon of all things TTRPG in the modern era. You have a certain number that you have to meet or beat, and if you do that, that's good on you. If you don't get that, then you don't do the thing that you want to do. If you roll a 1, that's a fumble, and then something really bad happens. If you roll a 20, something really good happens. And in combat, those effects are slightly different, but you can go and check out the rules on that to find out what they are. Character creation is always straightforward as well. It basically is determined by rolling 3 d6s 6 times for your different stats, because I can never fucking remember them, despite being classics of the system. Let's get back in there, you cheeky little cunt. We've got strength, dexterity, and constitution, and intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. You've got no other skills. Everything you're going to be rolling is determined by one of those skills, and then depending on if you've got a plus, negative, or no modifier, you then add that to the d20 roll. So, for an example, if we use the Emma dog example, the weak spot thing, I could have my players, okay, roll wisdom to see if they notice anything. I could just do that to spook with them, or the player may ask, can I see like anything, what can I see about this creature, and then have them roll wisdom, and let's say that they've got like a +2 in that, they add that 2 to their d20 roll. So if I want, say, DC of difficulty check of 13, they roll 11, but that +2 modifier bumps that up to 13, so they're able to see what they need to see, and if they rolled a 20, they'd be able to see even more of that, or some other detail I may throw at them, etc, etc. And I like the fact how simple it is. So from a modern perspective, you would expect like your core attributes and like some smaller skills to like to customize the bits and pieces together. So using a system that I know very well, Vampire the Masquerade, if I wanted a strong sword fighter, for example, I would put some dots in strength, most of my dots in dexterity, because that's the damage dealing stat for the most part, and then put some dots in melee to demonstrate that they're very good with a sword and sword-like weapons. With here, no, you have to stick whatever modifier that you get, although a generous GM may allow you to reroll things, and you may re-roll things on your own if you're doing things privately until you get something that you're content with, providing you're not cheating, because you'll only be cheating yourself at the end of the day. But as written, you're supposed to roll 3d6 and then stick with the modifiers that you have, so the dice dictate the sort of character you're going to have, which is a bit old school in places, which some people might like, but I find that quite encouraging to come up with some very interesting characters. The first character I made was a goblin thief, who had really poor constitution, really poor strength, really high dexterity, and then everything else is like a +1 or 2, I don't really remember. And that sort of came me up this idea, okay, well, it's clearly the stats are pointing in the direction of thief, but he's like a bit of a suave, cocky little so-and-so, which I thought was really interesting, that 6 stats managed to come up with a very interesting way I was going to be role-playing the character, which sort of made me realise that you don't need all the bits and pieces to make the character your own, providing you're willing to be open and creative. And it sort of made me realise that the stats here are sort of divided into two groups, like inherent stats and learnt stats. Like, you could argue that the intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are like the inherent stats, because charisma is described here as convince creatures to be friendly, resist mental control. That says nothing about beauty, which is where you would find in something like Dungeons and Dragons or other skills that use charisma. That's often paired to your physical attractiveness. Now, the two can go hand in hand, but not always. And I thought it was interesting that a goblin, which are stereotypically ugly, ended up having this high level of charisma. So I thought, okay, well, maybe that's why he's charismatic in that sense. It's the fact that he's able to convince people, or not so much to resist mind control, even though the two are paired like that. Wisdom and intelligence. Wisdom I put down to like a street smarts, being like raised up on the street. And intelligence I wasn't too sure about until I rolled on the background later on, and he was a doctor that he actually uses an actual word for, like an ye old version of doctor, which I then twisted to be a grave robber. So he was probably a doctor in some form of practice and then got caught and now like loots and pillages graves and sells them on to the highest bidder sort of thing. And then the learned stats are constitution, dexterity and strength, where through physical training, etc. and so forth, you could be big and strong. But then again, you could swap that the other way around. You could argue, well, people are naturally strong or naturally have a lot of physical strength. Like, I'm not the strongest person in the world, but it takes a lot for me to be fucking ill. Whereas I feel that I am not. Whereas I feel I have more dots in intelligence than I do in wisdom. And I say dots because I'm making the World of Darkness comparison where it's a skill buy system rather than a plus or negative modifier thing. I also say through its character creation process, it's actually where its biggest strength shines through the most, probably because it's where most players and games masters are going to be visualizing the book the most, reading the book the most, I should say. I can English, I promise. It's the fact that for the most part of the book, everything that you're going to find is going to be presented in the 2 pages right in front of you. There's not going to be many instances of turning to X page to find X number thing, which is probably like one of the few criticisms that I have with this. The way that it deals with EXP is one of those instances where it tells you a little bit about it and then it tells you to go and turn to another page about it. And I also don't like the fact that that EXP is only dealt with obtaining treasure. Now, I do acknowledge that this is part of like an older design of fantasy TTRPG design, so I can't knock it too much in that regard. And I also like the fact that it encourages players that you don't have to go and kill everything, where certain other fantasy TTRPGs would encourage you to do so, because you're basically a demigod from the get-go, which is not the case here. Your characters are glass cannons, and it only takes one bad dice roll in a combat encounter to completely wipe out your character, which, as a horror enthusiast and games master, I absolutely love that the players are constantly feeling fearful because they can see that their characters are glass cannons. And also, providing that things are balanced, everything else is on a similar fighting page as you, that it's just as easy to kill things as it is to be killed. I just don't like it that there isn't any suggestions for slaying monsters. Like, if you go into a dungeon, there's a big old boss fighter, say a big old spider that I might have mentioned earlier on. It's this big dramatic encounter. You would have hoped that you might have gained some experience points of that. Now, that's easy to rectify because it gives you like the little free table thing, like 0, 1, like 1, 2, and 3, like how valuable treasure is. You could then reframe it like the strength of the monster, like a rat, a horde of skeletons, big ass boss fight, right? And you can add more to that depending on the scale of the boss fight. So it's easy to adapt for sure, but it would be nice if, in an official sense, there was been something for like defeating monsters. So if players were forced in a scenario like that, for which a lot of fight encounters are, because the game master wants to throw a fight-based encounter in a fighting-based fantasy game, that there was just something there. But going back to my original point on the presentation, most of what you're going to be finding is presented on 2 pages spreads. And as I said, that is most apparent within its character creation, for which, as I mentioned already, there's like a small collection of ancestries. You've got dwarf, elf, goblin, half-orc, halfling, and human, like the classic fantasy grouping there. And then you open it up, you've got the fighter class, and most of which is taken up by what's probably my favourite bit of artwork in the entire book, a half-orc warrior. It gives them information about what the fighter class is, what weapons they can use, what armors they can use, their hit points, which is all generated by rolling particular dice, a special ability or 2 or several. Then you've got some talents that you can roll upon, and when you level up, you can, depending on the level, you may gain another talent. But yeah, all you need is on 1 page and a bit of artwork to represent the fighter class. So if you're skimming through trying to find what you're looking for, and you don't see the text, you can say, oh yes, that's the fighter. Here's the fighter here. And there's a little bit of flavour text at the bottom as well, just to create the fighter energy, I guess. Nothing stings sweeter than a whistling axe, Jorbin, dwarf fucking fire. There's no fucking, I should put that in there, but you get the general idea. There isn't any flavour text of the priest, but it's not consistent, but the little bits here and there just really help to bring out the flavour of the fantasy setting. Next page, the priest. Now this one does use 2 pages because half of it's done with the priest artwork just to know what they look like, which is useful to know for those who can't imagine things properly, and there's also the chance that this is the very first TTRPG that somebody may be playing. You've got the list of priest spells, the priest talents, and all the other bits and pieces I've mentioned already, which does remind me, spells. I like the fact that at the beginning of the magic chapter it breaks down by the different tiers of like basically how strong each magic spell is, etc. and so forth. I don't like it that they're then presented alphabetically, because you've got the tiers alphabetically, and I had thought that it was going to carry on in that similar sort of thing. So all the tier 1s are going to be together alphabetically, all the tier 2s are going to be together alphabetically. But no, the actual bunch of magic spells are all presented all together alphabetically. Which, okay, it's done alphabetically, so you're able to find what you're looking for pretty fucking easily, but you set it up one way and then do something else. I just think it's a bit tiresome, honestly. It's, again, a little gripe, but not the end of the world. But going back to the classes, Thief, similar to the Fighter. Page of artwork, a thief going into a dungeon crypt like with some treasure and some water. What the fuck are they going to find down there? Abilities, talents, flavor text. Wizard, similar to the priest. You've got a goblin wizard, which I love because people don't typically think of goblins as wizards. It's usually an elven thing. So I like the fact that it's breaking the mould a little bit. The priest looks like a dwarf to me as well. Like, I like the fact that you've got the bit of diversity and it's encouraging people to do something different. Now, is that a human? Or is that a thief? Because some of the elven abilities favour of thief abilities as well, which is nice. I just like how simple things are. Background. All you need is a D20 roll, alignment, another page. I don't think alignment is all too useful in this game, but then again, I don't remember all the spells and magics and see if there's anything that detects that. The alignment, chaotic, lawful, neutral thing is just as a role-playing thing, I think, and just to give a general mood or vibe about certain thing, creature-wise in general. Deities, gods, because that's important for priest-related stuff. All you need is on 2 pages. Titles. For when your characters level up, like a fighter, a lawful fighter becomes squire, cavalier, knight, thane, lord/lady. All that on 2 pages, a bit of artwork to break it up. It's all very straightforward and easy to navigate because it's either on 1 or 2 pages, except for those 2 instances where you're going to get diverted to a completely separate page, which, given it doesn't happen all that much, I can forgive that a little bit. It's so easy to navigate, for the most part, when you're not having, like, fucking weird brain fart moments like I did, constantly trying to find things. And again, you've got this little bookmark thing, so you can just find what you want pretty easily. Like, I know that one towards the back is where all the monster stats are. I think the one before that is, like, all the general dungeon randomizing stuff, which I completely forgot to mention. Like, there's so many different tables for generating different districts, like, all done in alphabetical, of course. Castle districts, caves, like little cave encounters, which is again as a D100 roll. What number should we roll, Holly? 14. Fuck it. 14 would generate a basilisk guards its nest of its 4d4 stones. Is that the creature that was hiding on earlier on? Let's ask the Oracle and work that one out. I don't think it's very likely because I envision this creature with legs, so it's a disadvantage, just to link everything back together again. You know, it just has so much in here and it's just so much to play that it's really difficult not to recommend it if you're wanting to try out fantasy-style TTRPGs. That is simple, straightforward, easy to get into, either as a traditional group or stuff with solo as well, because as I said, this is really the perfect solo TTRPG fantasy game because how everything is contained in here. It really has everything that you need in here, and it just kind of makes me question a little bit where to go from this in terms of expanding the material other than just adding campaign settings, because you covered everything, I guess. I mean, you get more theme-related things like with the Cursed Scrolls Zine 1, which is more horror-related, I guess, but that really does feel optional rather than actual material that you're missing out on, so to speak. Any material that you're missing out on is more a FOMO thing. Which does lead me to the rest of this video, which if you wondered why it was so long as it is, I'm really fucking confused about ShadowDark. And so's Holly, as she's sort of giving me a really confused look, although that might be towards the fact that she's just staring at me lovingly, and I haven't picked her up yet. Which is so fucking rude of me, I guess. So why am I confused by a ShadowDark? Well, honestly, I'm not really sure why it is so popular as is. But Lore, you've just done nothing but shine it praise. I mean, the solo rules are a bit disappointing, but a little niggles here and there. You absolutely love ShadowDark, so why are you confused by it? Well, you might have noticed I sort of been darting around its main inspiration, referring to it as a D20 based fantasy game, and referring to older things, it's a D&D clone, alright? Because I see so many reviews out there that say it's like Dungeons and Dragons but OSR, old school revival or renaissance. God, it's so nice to be saying that now, because I've been trying so hard not to make those comparisons, because everyone has made those comparisons. And on the one hand, I don't think it's fair to compare it to Dungeons and Dragons, especially from the current 5th edition standpoint. But I also think that it's important to highlight, because at the end of the day, it was designed to be a response to D&D 5th edition, in a sense. That, like D&D 5e, with some of those OSR elements that Kelsey likes. And she talks about this a lot on her channel, in interviews, and that sort of information is just darted around everywhere I ever go and look on the fucking TTRPG. It's very fucking difficult to avoid the fact that ShadowDark is very much a D&D clone. Now, until fairly recently, I thought the success of this game was a popularity, golden goose, lightning in a bottle sort of thing, because this came about right in the middle of the OGL scandal, where Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, let's be honest, Hasbro, decided they were going to try and make more money off of the license they had established for the last 20 so years, and the whole TTRPG community went, you know what? Fuck you, you're not doing this. Like, mainstream news covered it. Like, it was so difficult not to hear about it in one form or another, and it would prevent a game like this being made, where if it raised so much money or sold so many copies or something, they'd have to stop paying, or they couldn't start using a lot of the monsters in here, etc. and so forth. And eventually they relented on that decision, and they've gone back to the OGL thing. I actually think they made it Creative Commons in the end. I don't remember, but basically it allowed this to be made. So with all of that going on, and that Kickstarter going on, there was a lot of people really fucking frustrated with Wizard of the Coast lying and treating its fan base like shit. There was also a handful of like generative AI scandals along the way as well, some of which was mistakes, some of it was legitimate, despite the fact that Wizard of the Coast saying that they weren't going to do generative AI. They started using generative AI, not just with D&D, but they tried doing it with the Magic the Gathering trading card as well. There was the whole D&D Beyond thing, where when they updated the game, they changed some of the Magic homebrewing rules or something. I think I'm talking about two separate things here, and I think that happened in the next year, honestly, or they were just leading up to it. There was the D&D Beyond virtual TTT, virtual tabletop, I'm one T too many, stuff that really frustrated people, because it was very clear that Wizards of the Coast were like wanting to treat Dungeons and Dragons now as more as like a multimedia brand, and thinking that the best way to play I nearly tripped up and said video games, to play the TTRPG is to do something that was akin to a video game, like Baldur's Gate 3, with like special minis and dice, all digital, in a operating system where it just segregates everybody to their platform. So if you wanted to play D&D, you'd only be able to go through Wizards of the Coast. And through various different things like that, people are just frustrated and angry and frustrated that they want to play D&D, but they don't want something with all the fucking corporate bullshit. They don't want things with all the bloat, because D&D 5th edition by itself is a bloated mess. Like, I would have brought it down, but I cannot be asked for it. But I was sort of like gaslit into buying like the deluxe core edition stuff. So it's like the 3 core books, so the player's guide, the GM's guide, and the monster manual with those shiny covers and the slipcase and the GM screen. I didn't buy it at full price, it was on sale at a time. And I looked through the player's guide, and I was a bit baffled why every fucking monster had dark vision in a game called Dungeons and Dragons, where I thought the idea was to be exploring dark, dangerous environments. Why do all these races, ancestries, legacies, races, whatever you want to fucking call them, have all these different fucking abilities? And why is character creation so fucking laborious? Like, when I was trying to make my first character, it was a tiefling. I vaguely remember posting about this on Twitter before Elon Musk sort of made it worse, well, much worse than it already was. And I was a bit confused with character creation, and I was like trying to ask the same friend who encouraged me to get the fucking book to run, and they just flat out did not remember, because they'd been using D&D Beyond for ages to make characters. And I just thought that was a bit bizarre. I then asked somebody else who then just said, just use D&D Beyond. It's like, look, if I have to use an external app to make a fucking character to play the fucking game, your game is shit. okay? Like, there is just no two ways about it. It is ultimately flawed because you have to use an external app to play your TTRPG. And for comparison for a game I really do like, Cyberpunk Red, a lot of people tell me to use the companion app. It's like, well, I don't use the app for it because I've sort of like brute forced my way into making characters for it, and at least it does offer a simpler method of making character creation. I find that game really fucking difficult to get into because of how garbage the character sheet is and just how bizarre the character creation process is, but that's a review for a separate time. This is talking about ShadowDark. So with all these different factors in mind, the fact that throughout the last 10 or so years there have been different books and rulings and how really D&D 1 or whatever it's fucking called now was like 5.1, should have called it D&D 6th edition or whatever, really frustrated with all the different books, the bloat and everything. They just wanted to play a really simple fucking fantasy game that didn't have all the fucking bullshit associated with it. Along comes ShadowDark, lightning in a bottle moment. It just seems to be the answer to a lot of people's prayers, especially for older players. So it has all the simplicity of the D&D stuff with the D20, but with all the other nostalgia found within the OSR stuff that people like, that the fact exploring dungeons as a focus, that players don't have dark visions, enemies can see in the dark, the simplified stat, your players are glass cannons, and you know, it's gone back to its roots, and I think that just made up people very happy with things. But Lore, it can't be a D&D clone, it's got that, what about the light mechanic? Yeah, so I haven't mentioned that yet because I don't think it's all that. I mean, it's neat, admittedly, but it's shit that I've seen before in other systems, where you go into a dungeon, if you don't have a torch illuminating what you can see or some sort of light, the Games Master is supposed to turn on an hour timer, and when that timer goes out, the torch or light source goes out. Which is neat, it puts a focus on the actual exploration of the dungeon, that you may not be able to find all the treasure or defeat all the monsters or whatever, that it makes it a far more grim dark in that perspective, like paired with the artwork as well. It does make it a more horrifying experience, but in all honesty it's kind of horror adjacent, because I wouldn't really call this as a horror game. I mean, as frightening as that may look and as weird it is, how like borderlines like eldritch horror, that is basically at the end of the day a beholder stand-in. They can't use beholder because it's a Wizards of the Coast property, so they have to call it like the Ten-Eyed Oracle or something like that. And let's be real here, who actually plays TTRPGs enough time in a session where a mechanic like that is actually useful? Because when I run games, it's between 3, maybe 4 hours. I don't think my players are going to be spending a whole time in a dungeon for an hour. Maybe half an hour, depending on what I've done, especially when I tend to run a lot of one-shots on a large campaign. So that's not going to really be of much benefit. Now, admittedly, there is an alternate rule here. I can't remember if it's in the core book or it's in the solo rules, where dealing with... No, it's definitely... I think it's in the solo rules, where rather than lasting an hour, torch goes out in 10 rounds, which I actually think is a really neat idea. Yeah, light sources last 10 rounds instead of 1 hour of real time, which works a lot better actually, because you could treat it as like the players moving about or doing an action as like around, which means they really have to be fucking careful about what they do. How are they going to manage this actual resource? Because torches take up an inventory slot, so you may have to sacrifice treasure and other bits and pieces in that regard as well. That is, of course, if you're using the ruling where treasure does take up an inventory spot, and not treasure being like a hand wavy thing that you don't have to worry about. Like, inventory could be like for gears and weapon and that sort of thing, which I'm more in favour for, honestly. But wouldn't be upset if I was in a game and somebody wanted to treat it something like that anyway, unless I found out last minute into like a 3-hour game. But that's a very nitpicky thing, I feel. So the whole hour based thing for time isn't that great. It's certainly not, I feel, a selling point of that game. It's like a neat little mechanic that's handled better, in my opinion, in an optional solo rules. So with all of that in mind, it does not really surprise me that it raised that much money, because there was a lot of tension for it. But this is not the only D&D clone that has done really well recently. There's, what's the guy's name? Matt Corfield. He's done a game called Draw Steel or something like that. That raised a lot of money. Colbert Press did a very similar sort of thing. Pathfinder became a lot more popular because people wanted to play a D&D game and they looked for alternatives. Which is rather frustrating on my part, and I'm going to be totally honest here, I do not think this should have won all the awards at the Ennies it should have done last year. Because it's a popularity contest, and people found this a really popular thing last year and the year prior. Like, it won awards for Best Layout Designer. I don't remember all of it, but it was like nominated for a load, and it won a load. Which, again, going back to what I said at the beginning of this video, great success story and all the rest of it. I'm really proud of Kelsey and everybody else who worked on this. And I'm really also glad that the Underdog has gone fuck you to Wizards of the Coast. We managed to do something that you do, but a lot better. It's still using all their systems. It's still a D&D clone. And I have seen other games that, old, new, and between, that, to my knowledge, didn't even get a nomination for design layout. Because this is just a simple black and white thing. The text is just easy to read and yet looks aesthetically pleasing. So yeah, I'm glad that an independent game from an independent creator got the recognition they deserved of, like, marrying their OSR interest with the D&D philosophy. Great fucking marketing, by the way. Like, that was just more than a homebrew idea. That's just great stuff there. But at the end of the day, it is just a D&D clone, and I just find that a little grating, honestly, where you had something like fucking Eat the Reich, which is one of the most gorgeous fucking games I have seen in a very long time. I might have won something, I don't remember, but it's just a bit But do remember that I did say that I thought this was all just a popularity thing, that there's just a resistance to the man. Well, it's just raised 2.3 million for its latest crowdfunding thing. Like the West Marches or the East Marches or whatever it's called. I think it's called the East Marches because it's a West Marches campaign theme where you move across different hex maps and things. So essentially it raised double the amount of money for that. So I think we can dispel all notion that it's just a popular thing because it's D&D but a little different. Like, people do seem to really like it, and I think that ShadowDark is going to have a really strong legacy, because that's also paired with the fact that there is a lot of homebrew content out there. When I did my unboxing video, I also bought as a treat for myself Shadowrim, which is a combination of ShadowDark system and the Skyrim background setting, although it's not Skyrim because copyright stuff, but it's very fucking close to Skyrim, where it's like that close away getting copyright striked and all the rest of that. There's a lawsuit pending, I reckon. There's the same guy also did something that was very inspired by Vampire the Masquerade. There are other campaign settings out there. There's like player companions and games master themes, different classes, etc. and so forth. That's where its legacy is found, and that's where a lot of the proof to me that it's not just a popular resistance piece, as it were, that people generally do like it, that they're making content for it, how easy and accessible it is to make material, because Kelsey / the Arcane Library has allowed people to be so generous with its license, which definitely was a political thing against Wizards of the Coast being so fucking resistant with its OGL thing. Although Kelsey may have also been that open with the license from the get-go. I don't know. I can only make assumptions, but there's definitely a political messaging in there for sure. And I'm as I said, I'm really glad that we have like this uprising, as it were. I just really fucking wish it just did a bit more than just distill 5th edition and just like streamlined OSR stuff, if I'm being really fucking honest. But, you know, I'd much rather this sort of thing exist than not exist. I'd much rather prefer like D&D clones existing where they're all doing the same sort of thing, but there's a little tweak here and there. So to make another Vampire the Masquerade comparison, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, infamous being a buggy mess, and they're different unofficial patches that are supposed to address different things. Like, if you want different tweaks and things, you know, to hone your experience that way, you can find the exact version of the game that you want. With OSR sort of games, you can find different things that you want. If you want something that's like D&D 5th edition, that's got some OSR flavour to it, buy that. If you want something that's a bit more accessible but feels more OSR than ShadowDark, Old School Essentials is the one that you're looking for. But you can also buy the old school D&D stuff print on demand from Drive-Thru RPG. Like, up until 4th edition, you can buy print on demand. You can't buy 5th edition print on demand, but you can get all that stuff up there anyway, so that's like not gone. The basic essentials is PDF only, unfortunately. I know because I've checked all of this prior to this review. If you want something that's OSR adjacent, that's got more, I don't know, a horror vibe to it, buy Merkborg. If you want something that's D&D like but that's more horror like, Shadow the Demon Lord. I like the fact that they exist and they're doing different things, but at the end of the day they are just D&D clones. I just find that just a bit irking, just a bit frustrating, that rather than just wanting to try new things, they want to do new adjacent. And this talk of OSR stuff does bring on like a sort of uncomfortable part of the conversation where, because it's not attached to D&D 5th edition, where certain people think it's woke because it has fantasy creatures eating non-fantasy things, or you have inclusivity, people of colour, mixed races, marrying, all that sort of real bare bones basic shit. Wizards of the Coast and D&D 5th edition has gone woke. We're going to go and play ShadowDark because it's not woke. My brother in Christ, Kelsey Dion, is gay, right? There's a picture that flies around occasionally of her in a fucking wedding dress of a partner I put up there. People point to a Pinterest post quite a lot, but it's on her fucking Instagram page, okay? There is no fucking denying that the game that you love so much is made by a woke woman. And the fact that it being a woman makes it woke as well. So for you to say that love ShadowDark because it's not woke, well, we've just ascertained it's designed by a lesbian, or at the very least someone who's bisexual or pansexual. I don't know about Kelsey's sexuality, and I don't particularly care, because as long as they're happy and not hurting anyone, do whatever you fucking want. And some people would say that ShadowDark is woke nonsense because it was designed by a woman and we shouldn't have women in fucking games. I don't believe this. Do not take this out of fucking context. I will come down you like a ton of fucking bricks. I'm just making the point here that it's attracted to certain kind of people, and I don't really see much conversation trying to reject this idea. In fact, if you go onto the Arcane Library Discord, you actually see this sort of thing being encouraged, because one of the things you see on the Discord server is a no politics server. It is also a server that has a channel where you can post AI art. I do not like this at all. Because rather than going, no art, don't be a fascist pig, you're sort of cutting off all those levels of conversation. And I'm very much in the mindset regarding this that silence is compliance. But I also do appreciate that this is a server with like many 1,000 of members on here, and trying to moderate that is a fucking minefield. But if you make it very fucking clear where your politics stand, you filter out a lot of the fucking trash, honestly. And just pretending that none of it exists and doing the best to get along with people. Like, I know some people are going to complain about this. I'd find it very difficult to be in a game with somebody who's right-wing, purely because these days they often want people who are queer, of colour, of women, or disabled to die, right? Because they agree with such far-right policies that... Anyway, this is going completely off fucking tangent, far more than I intend it to be. Just back to my original point, I don't get, beyond it being like a resistance piece, why ShadowDark is so popular as it is. I mean, other than being a fucking well laid out D&D clone where everything is found in one book and you don't need 3 fucking books to organise everything, which is something that you find with most fucking TTRPGs. So that's not something that's outstanding. The fear thing is not outstanding. The simplified mechanics is not an outstanding thing. Like, is this just a D&D mentality, like treating that D&D is like the only TTRPG that's out there, and now they're just opened up to all these other D&D like games? Like, I'm really perplexed about why this is so popular. Like, is it literally just because it's like the most D&D 5th edition thing that's out there that has the nostalgia baiting of the OSR stuff? I don't know. It's difficult to say, but it's very fucking clear that Kelsey is at least aware that people love the nostalgia of it. Hence the new campaign being a West Marches inspired thing. It's even got a similar naming scheme. How it's all hex map sort of stuff, which is a very old school D&D thing as well. it does make me wonder what a second edition of ShadowDark would look like, because to me, this is fairly perfect of what it's trying to do, and it's going to fall into that pit hole of like all this additional content that games masters are going to be on top of so they can run things for their players, and the players are going to throw like, I don't know, like different classes and spells found in zines and things. So it's going to be in that over-bloated category very soon. I'd actually argue it's there now, just with the amount of fucking fan content that's out there. Which is great because, you know, there's a collaboration with people who previously thought they couldn't be a creative writer in TTRPG stuff, assuming that they're not using generative AI slop, but they're actually making things. But yeah, eventually it's going to catch up with D&D. I'm being really fucking negative and cynical here, I know, but I do want to remind people that I do enjoy this game. I do enjoy running this game. And I want to do so much more with it, but I'm just a bit apprehensive with some of its community, because it's such a mixed wild bag out there. But that's kind of the TTRPG sphere in general. That's kind of the OSR thing in general. So I'm hoping something somewhere has encouraged you to go and check out ShadowDark, unless you're one of those weirdos who have gone, oh, apparently it's not woke, I'll go and get this then, because we've just ascertained by definition it's woke ideology is within the very pages of the book. I can still smell it. No, that's just the chemicals of the printing process, but you know what I'm trying to say here. But the reason why I got into ShadowDark is because it was experiencing FOMO. As I kind of alluded to earlier on with the whole D&D thing, I wanted to try D&D, and I had a friend who was able to capitalize on that and like encourage me to go and get it, but I just didn't like D&D. I bought Shadow the Demon Lord because it was a more horror-focused experience, but I didn't like all the bloat you found with the magic stuff, even though it was a generally simpler system to manage. I bought Merkborg because it was a really small, simple thing, and a lot of like actual play stuff was going on at the time. It's not so trendy anymore, so it doesn't really get talked about. It's sort of been claimed by the OSR lot, which doesn't like pair very well with the more inclusive actual play lot, I should say, generally speaking. But as much as I enjoy Merkborg, which I've reviewed on the channel already, it does have a very specific setting in mind, and it's a bit more difficult to make that a more generic fantasy setting that's like D&D and OSR stuff. Like, Morkburg is like an apocalyptic end of the world sort of thing, and it has its own flavours and its own brand of horrors to be working with. But the thing that actually led me to getting it and asking for a review copy is that when I saw a trailer for The Secret of Weepstone, which I played on the channel fairly recently, and despite having so much fun, it's like the worst viewed thing on the fucking channel, which is a bit upsetting. So go and check that out if you are a fan of OS Star and dungeon crawling games. With its black and white art style, and the person who was like playing it was talking all the way through, like saying, "Oh, it looked like this, it feels like that." It's like, wow, I'd never had that. I would like something like that. I'm never going to find something like that with my home game, Vampire the Masquerade. Because you get fucking... Well, have a look at the fucking display that we've got since Paradox have taken over. The only good ones have been visual novels, and everything else has been like B-grade Euro jank trash, unfortunately. I haven't played Bloodline, so I don't really know about that. And Swan Song just looks like absolute dog water. We might get a Disco Elysium clone, but that would require some creativity, and Paradox are just incapable of letting anybody doing that. Anyway, but regarding the fantasy stuff, I really wanted to try something like that. And because the Weepstone was so bold and vibrant with its black and white, I was reminded about ShadowDark. So I thought, okay, let's see what it's like. Let's see if I can get away with doing a review copy, running it for myself, running it for some friends, and see how we thought. Players had a fucking blast. I played it with some friends who don't really give a shit if their characters die, they're just in it for the ride. We had a fun time with it, and they want to do more, and we're going to try and rearrange to do it another time, and I think it's a great game. But I don't think it is immune from looking through a subjective lens, nor do I think it would be wise of me to ignore the fact that it is, at the end of the day, a D&D clone, and a lot of its popularity has been bolstered up by people going fuck you to Wizards of the Coast, which I do like, but at the end of the day, it does have its own cynical flaws, which might be my own, might be subjective, and I'm still trying to ponder out even as something that's so basic as this is so popular. So, knowing that the Arcane Library are going to be watching this, because in order to get this review copy, I had to pay for the shipping, but also I have to send over links to my videos via email, which I'm more than happy to do. I've got no problem with that. I'm really sorry if this comes out as like far too negative, or I'm like saying that you're not good enough, or like overrated or whatever. That's not what I want to say at all. It's just I'm very cynical about the whole D&D attitude of like it's the only TTRPG without out there, and the homebrew it until you break it mentality, like the classic how to make X game into D&D when there's a fucking TTRPG version of out there like that. I really do like this. It's a great book. It's a great quality product. I love the things that you've sent over. I've been having so much fun solo playing this. I'm not going to get it out because I'm going to completely ruin my mess up here, but I've bought like a B5 size notebook like to write my little games down to make this a far more enjoyable experience when doing solo stuff. And I've been having so much fun with it, just having so many different adventures with different characters I've mentioned. I know I've mentioned only one or two, but I've had so much fun with this and drawing out maps and things. I have found my fantasy TTRPG, and that's a really special thing for me, honestly. I'm really glad that you have been able to facilitate that and been very generous in sending over the review copies and the additional zine. I can't get over the kindness with that alone. I know it's a really small thing, literally, financially and physically, but you're really fucking cool company, and I'm really proud about like how much attention and praise that they're getting, because despite my cynical lens, it is well warranted. It could have been very easy to go completely balls to the walls of things, but they definitely had a look about what people like and what people are wanting and complaining that D&D doesn't do, and they sort of answered a lot of players. Very clever and very sensible, and it shows a lot of restraint and control over the vision, and I think that's something that should be applauded, honestly. And yet it looks really fucking cool and doesn't look like a fucking Word document, which I feel a lot of basic games do for one reason or another. So yeah, it's a great game. But if you're thinking that this is going to be like the coming of Christ in the fantasy world, I don't think it's all of that. It's a load of fun, but it's not as fantastic as a lot of people online will tell you it is. So what do you lot think about ShadowDark? I'm obviously excluding the Arcane Library lot who are going to be watching this review anyway, because I'm assuming that you like what you're working on. What do you think about ShadowDark? Good, bad, or somewhere in between? What do you like about it? What do you hate about it? And tell me other bits of homebrew and fan content that you think I might like. I've mentioned the Shadow Room one already. I'm actually debating doing like a small little actual play version of that. Small because I think my character died pretty fucking quickly and I don't care too much about that sort of thing. But also there's more solo stuff I want to do in 2026, one of which is going to be, well actually two of which are going to be really big projects. So I don't want to give too much of my attention to ShadowDark and focus on the much larger things. One of them is zombie related, and one of which is Spider-Man related, so I'm very excited about that. I've got in a wish list on Drive-Thru RPG the aforementioned vampire one, which has taken a lot of inspiration from Vampire the Masquerade. I'm going to get that at some point. Maybe do a little actual play about that. I have to go and see whether that's worth my time or not in that particular avenue. But yeah, let me know other bits and pieces that you might like, both official and fan content stuff. And whilst you're down there, go and check out the various links down in the description below if you want to try out the World of Darkness, because that's the sort of thing that I'm known for, because I've done some homebrew stuff with Vampire the Masquerade. Solo rules for Wraith the Oblivion, Worth the Apocalypse, and Vampire the Masquerade, funny enough, which, just to wake my ego a little bit, I think are better than the solo rules here, and you can actually adapt and twist them to use for your games of ShadowDark. If that's tickled your fancy, go and check those out. And if you purchase those with those specific links, I get some of the money back because I'm an affiliate on Drive-Thru RPG, and that sort of coinage is going to help me to provide more content like this and potentially pay shipping for more expensive review copies. But what if you've got those things already, or you just want to get something out, say a load of ShadowDark fan content? What you can do is copy the affiliate code and paste it in the URL of any Drive-Thru RPG purchase before you add it to the cart, and that coinage comes my way as well, which would be absolutely amazing shit. But I can understand if you can't do that at the moment, because money and everything else is hard for all of us right now, and I don't want you to feel that you're having to bust the bank and go hungry to support me. Like, it's a totally optional thing. You don't have to do it, so if you can, that'd be absolutely great. But you'd be rolling an advantage if you do that. But what you should definitely do regardless is give the video a cheeky little thumbs up, subscribe to the Lore by Night channel, and share this video with any and everyone who loves what I do, and I'll see you on the next upload, wherever that may well be for you. And if you're watching this video when this premieres, Happy Christmas, or whatever fucking festivities happening when you're watching this. And until next time, farewell, and a Happy New Year.